Okay, welcome to the Introduction to HTML. This is the webinar starting now. What I'm going to run through today is basically through a series of hands-on tutorials using brackets and having a very sort of basic introduction to HTML5. Also, if you feel free to ask any questions along the way and we'll actually get started. Okay, the most important part of the HTML page is a series of these, what we call tags. When you open up tag, normally most of these tags you have to close them by putting a / in front of them. These bits of text basically determine the content of what the actual page will contain. So obviously in a page header, you'll put things like the logo, the actual page, maybe a banner, any of these sort of items you see at the very top of a web page. The next HTML5 element you'll find is called a nav. A nav again opens the brackets, close the brackets. It means that these brackets are currently blank. In other words, there's nothing in them. And I just simply put these into rectangles to give you an idea of the space they contain. In the old days, we used to use divs as container tags. So that basically means that when you want an image, you put it in there, or some text you put in there. So there's currently no styling on this. This is simply tags. But I've laid it out so that at least visually you can actually recognize with something you've seen and you're familiar with in the past. Now, we don't have to use all of these tags, okay? We are allowed to basically simply use the elements that we need. Now, every page that exists will definitely have a navigation. And most cases will actually have a footer and a header. Now, internally, every single page will be different. So we don't always have to have a sidebar and we don't always have to have articles. Now, usually the main content is usually the section. But again, not always, and there's no hard and fast rule. So these three tags or elements, HTML5 elements, are actually ones that, depending on the layout and the content you have, it'll actually determine which ones you use. Okay, so don't feel like you have to use them all, or oh my God, I'm going to fail because I didn't use articles, I used a side. So these will come along as we go along. The footer, you'll find most pages have a footer with a disclaimer, any copyright information, and any linking as well. All right, any questions so far? Are we all good to get going? Just checking the group there, making sure I haven't put them to sleep yet. Damien's like his head. All good, okay. So I'm gathering that you guys are all, yep. So no questions, so get going. All right, so that's what I would define a HTML5 structural, or we call elements. Now, I'm sure you'll hear also a word called semantic. Semantic is really important because you basically have to have these in the right order of structure or hierarchy, so to speak. You'll find that when a web browser reads or it renders an actual web page you've made on the internet, not everything is visual, and this is very important, making sure that we understand the actual header and footer of these things. If I actually go to brackets, and I'll explain what you're seeing in the screen in a minute, but very briefly now, what I've got here is a HTML page, a CSS page. A CSS page allows us to add styling. It actually makes the text red, the image is a certain size. And so this here is the actual web page. Looks a bit unusual because I'm just trying to put that inside the screen. This is simply displaying what we've got here. So if I, in brackets very quickly, big red page, and I can just call it big red heading, you find that immediately using brackets, we can immediately see the actual changes occurring live. And this is important because instead of using something like Dreamweaver where these things can be built in, the WYSIWYG isn't reliable and the coding is at times non-semantic or convoluted. In other words, difficult for the students to understand. So getting back to what I was getting earlier here, this is a very simple web page where we can actually see that it's not going to win any design awards, but I've just laid it out so you can see the content. So we've got big red heading, we've got images, we have paragraph, bullet points, another paragraph. So if I actually click on the code here, this is one great thing about brackets, is that as I'm actually clicking on the code, I don't know if you guys can see that, this highlights in blue. So it tells you what part of the page you're currently touching. So if the code is there, wow, that's the logo. So that's the image. So that blue line shows me where that item or element sits on the page, and it actually highlights the entire element here. Same as that, that's a section. See how I put all the content in one section? There's a paragraph, the first paragraph. The second paragraph, which is really more of an unordered list. And the third and last paragraph there, and that's the end of the section, which again highlights the whole thing in blue. Can you guys see those blue when I click on that? cool. Yep. Okay. Good. Just let me know because I'm presuming you can see things as well. This thing here doesn't freak you out. I'm actually magnifying the screen where the mouse is so that at least you have an idea of what it is I'm talking about. So just to give you a bit of guide on it. Okay, so getting back to what I was saying, this is an example of a very simple web page. We currently have a split screen view. When you are working on an actual page you're building for real, you'll find it's very handy to actually have the HTML, which is all the structural elements that I was defining before in that diagram I showed you. And over here, we actually have the CSS, which allows us to style these items. And I'll explain in a minute what all this means. So believe it or not, and this is hopefully to instill some confidence in you, is that for the last, I've been teaching web since 1994, and every student that I've basically had has been able to understand this and get their head around. So right now, it'll look like, if you're not used to coding, a bit like Greek text or hieroglyphics for you. The reality is that you will eventually become quite accustomed to what all this means, and we'll take it nice and easy. Alrighty, are there any pending questions bursting from the peanut gallery you guys want to ask, or should I just keep going? Okay, got a couple typing coming up there. Okay, we're good there. Is Brackets a software you're using? Should we download it? That's correct. Excellent. Good point there, Steve. That's basically leads me into the. Now, I didn't actually pay Steve to ask me that, but thankfully he's actually asked it in the right order. So thanks for that. Yes, it works on Windows, Mac, and Unix. Everything that I give you guys, even though I am on a Mac, I am not Mac agnostic. It means that you guys as digital media designers should be able to work on any platform. I can work on Windows, Mac, and Unix, because in the end, we have to produce all things to all people. Okay, so getting back to the question Steve asked us, Brackets is free. This is the link right here. I'm going to put the link inside the thread here so you guys can see it. That is how you access. Now, Brackets was actually developed, believe it or not, initially by Adobe, and the same company that made Dreamweaver and the other softwares. But because this has actually been designed by professionals, believe it or not, the entire software runs and is built on JavaScript. So it's basically the same technology that we use to build web pages on. Why do we use Brackets? There's a whole series of it. I don't get paid commission, nor am I sourcing to push the product. The main reason for it is, as professionals, myself and a lot of people that I know use it. It's free, it's easy to download, it's lightweight, it's very powerful, but it's also very powerful for those who are new to web, okay, as in you guys. Now what I'm going to do here is, before I make a start on Brackets, I want to define exactly the workflow that I want you guys to have when you are making web pages. So I'm going to just move these things out of the screen, and if you excuse those who are on Windows, the actual folder layout, it's important to get an idea of what you are looking at here, your folder structure. I think some of you guys might know this already. Some of you guys might be new to you. Now, whenever you actually make an actual web page, you'll find that your folder, your site root folder, this is basically the area that everything that gets uploaded to the internet should reside, okay? Now, if you forget an image inside the images folder and you upload this whole folder, that's where you're going to see the actual web page with a little missing link or a missing item. It basically means that you forgot something, okay? Now, that's on one hand. This is an area where some students sometimes forget to put things in there. So it's crucial that before you start, you place all your items inside the folder structure, okay? So it's important that you always have your folder structure nice and simple, okay? So you have images, you put your images inside that. Index is obviously the web page. Now later on, I'm going to cover styles, so CSS. So as you can see, you guys all see that? Quite simple folder structure. You notice I'm also using lowercase. Very important. Does anyone want to have a guess, apart from the fact that I'm a bit sort of OCD, why would we recommend to actually use lowercase names and terminology? Any guesses? Damien's typing an answer. It's okay if you don't know. It's an intro to HTML. So, of course, if you use Damien's response is, because if you use caps, then you forget to put them later, nothing will work. Correct. That is actually a very crucial point. If you actually start to name the files capital letter and then the name, and then when you go into the code, you forget to do the same thing, yes, that can actually work. That's a very good point, Damien. Another one is, believe it or not, because later on you guys, we're doing HTML, CSS, and the third language you'll be using is JavaScript. Now, JavaScript is case sensitive. It basically means it doesn't get offended when you actually up or lower the case. What it means is that it doesn't, it actually understands that it's a lower and uppercase. So, and normally we use that to do code and to do other things. So it's best to keep your learning journey simple, making sure that you always use lowercase for everything unless you have to. And you have to would be because you're using or you're typing JavaScript code. Is that clear? So again, this is very crucial if you're taking notes or you pretend to take notes. That's one very important thing to remember and keep in mind is always use lowercase for everything you use. Now, there are exceptions to the rules. I'm sure that other people will come in and maybe give us that. But for now, if you're learning, maintain that. Also, try not to have any spaces between the names of files. You can use underscore and other fancy stuff, but it's best to just keep things simple for this when you're first starting, okay? Once you use, I think we got here, Steve, once you start using LMSs and CMSs where things come built in with PHP, some of those things will appear to break the rules, but in reality, it works in that environment, okay? All right, so I'll keep, any questions so far? Is this clear about the folder structure? I'm using any images that I want to put inside the web page, like this logo here. I've actually placed it in here, and I call it, God forbid, something benign as logo.png. I've also got a background here, which I'll sneak in later with code. The page. This is, again, thanks, Steve, confirming that. One big thing you have to remember to use is to make the home page has to be called index. Now, I know Damien's typing something in there now, but does anyone know why that's important? Why should your home page should always be called index? Any guesses? With images, do they need to be certain file format size? Yes, they do. Damien just asked, do these images, do they need to be certain file format or size? The reality is yes. Now, obviously for a background image, as you can see here, I've purposely used a big image. Now for the logo is that when I'm going to hold some Photoshop tutorials like this webinar, I'll explain image optimization is almost a topic in its own right. And so I want to cover that properly in Photoshop. So for now, I'm presuming to make life easier for us that someone has given us these images already prepared for the web, which you will later learn how to do yourself. Okay? Does that answer your question, Damien? Yep. And so, so as far as file format, very quickly, if you want to write something down, PNGs are very good for logos which have flat colors. Okay, PNGs. It's not Papua New Guinea. It stands for, I forget now. And the other images good for photograph is a JPEG. A JPEG is very good when you're using what I call graduation or high level of colors. Okay, so you'll find a JPEG can actually hold millions of colors, and you'll be able to see this actually got a lot more detail in it. All right, so for now, if we just want to write that down, JPEGs or PNGs are good for images. Please don't use anything else. You notice that the images as well have been optimized so that this is not larger than my screen. Why? Because the background of the page would be only within the screen size. And that is a whole different topic that I'll cover, like I said, later in a future seminar. Okay, Steve Little's asking a question. PNG, thank you for that, Steve. PNG stands for Portable Network Graphics, not Papua New Guinea, as for some reason. I'm trying to not sound silly. That was in my head for some reason. All right, thanks for that, Steve. So Portable Network Graphics, and JPEG stands for. It's actually a French one. I'll let you guys, someone who knows it, give us the answer. Any smarty pants? Maybe Steve can get someone else to go. Okay, let's move on. So let's get back to. So hopefully I've made it quite clear. The site root is basically the folder that we're going to upload completely up onto the, if I go to my desktop, there's my site root. That's the folder that I'm going to be uploading onto the internet. Now, this is going to have to be a very lean folder. In other words, by lean, I mean quite small in file size. On Mac and Windows, you can do the same thing. You can also have a look at how big this currently is. You'll find that this is only 1.7 megs, and it shouldn't be too big because if it's over some monstrosity, as you can gather, if you upload this website, downloading will be more of a nightmare, especially if you're on a mobile phone and you're with bad reception. So it's very important that we maintain very lean, very small websites, and we'll cover that in more detail later. Okay, great. Let's move on. All right, so if I now that we've actually got when we actually make a start, just to be fair and not confuse you guys, there'll be no index page and no sample pages. There'll obviously be folders which have images and maybe a folder that's actually empty, because we haven't, if we're going to start from scratch, we wouldn't be having these here yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pretend that we don't have that. So I'm going to take that out of the folder. Now this is going to ruin and muck up brackets, which is good, because what I want to do is this is how we make a start with brackets. So what I'm going to do there is just leave that like that. So this is how you start with brackets from scratch. So those who are taking notes are more than welcome to begin like that now. So we're going to go File, and close all. This is really important when you're working from one website to the next. We don't want to save anything here because we want to maintain it. When you find brackets loads up for the very first time, it'll look like this. It'll have no split. So I don't know if you guys can see the screen here, but if I actually do the zoom, it's a very lean layout. Okay, some of these icons here, I apologize, I've actually added them because I do use this for actual real jobs. So some of these are productivity tools which are free. They're extensions you can actually add or subtract. The one that matters, and the one that I want you guys to focus on, is this one here. That's your preview. Okay, that one allows you to connect to the web browser when you actually make changes to the web page. Okay, so brackets is simply at the heart of it an actual text editor. So it allows you to basically edit text and obviously make any sort of style of pages on it. So obviously here, the first thing you do when you are making a brand new web page is you need to define a website. And to define a website, you simply go to File and down to Open Folder. This is really important, a really important process, a step, because the software has no idea where your website is, especially if you've got more than one website. It's crucial that you actually learn to define it and say, yep, that's my website. I've made it nice and easy for me to find, called site route 1 green. If I open that, that means that now I can see the folder structure here. If I actually go and open up another folder just to demonstrate that is not that, let's just call it, it's got Area 51, it's got all kinds of images in there. And you can see this obviously is not what we're after. So it obviously has JPEGs and images, and it'll confuse you because obviously this is not a website and actually just a simple folder structure that we shouldn't be really making a web page from. So file open, make sure that you've got site route. Okay, so here we go, we've got that there. So now we have now defined the site. So brackets now knows basically where we are on the actual computer as far as where we're going to store these files. This is crucial because those who used Dreamweaver before have noticed that if you don't define a website, even in Dreamweaver, your links are broken and your images go whoop whoop, because basically the software has no idea where you begin your site route, where your home page is, so to speak. Okay, any questions on that? Have I made myself ultimately clear? Defining a website is very important, and you need to go to File, Open Folder, to basically make sure that the website knows where your site route is. Are we all good to go there? Any confirmation from the guys? Sorry, and girls? Cool, excellent. All right. Okay, let's push on. So then we've got the site route is now defined. The first thing we're going to do now is obviously make a web page. Now the software hasn't got anything. This is a blank page. This is nothing obviously in here. So I'm going to go to File, believe it or not, New. And when you make new, this could be anything. This could be a HTML page, a CSS page, a JavaScript page. It's simply a text editor. Now this only becomes a page when I save it. So whenever you've got a File New, the first thing you do after that is File Save As. Now I'm going to call this index because it is going to be my home page. .html. I am keeping lowercase and a few typos are free to make sure that this works. So index.html. Now when you actually add the extension, those who are on Windows probably recognize this, those on Macs don't tend to see this a lot. A file extension tells the software, especially the operating system, what kind of a file it is, okay? So all files initially start as text, and then when we actually give it a definition like this, it will make it like that. Please keep in mind that if a file happens to be already something else, just by changing the extension, it will not change it to that per se. So for those that understood what I just said then. That's good. For those who didn't, don't worry, we'll be covering that in advanced future webinars. Okay, so I'm going to save this obviously in the site root. This is really important. Now, because I opened the folder, Brackets already knows that this is where I should be saving my files. So I'm going to save it in here. Now, when you actually use any text editing software, you'll find that it has these numbered lines. These numbered lines do not affect the code, do not print, and are only viewable when you actually view the code with human eyes. So it's a good way for us to be able to find and get an idea of what line we're up to. Okay, so to make a start with, what I'm going to do is to make this a little bit more interactive, and you're free to actually unmute your microphones if you find it's a bit easier to talk to me that way. What do we put on the very first line of a web page to let it know that it is a HTML page? Any guesses? Doc type, excellent. And Damien said doc type. Now, does anyone know what the correct syntax? And by syntax, I mean how do we type the actual doc type up on the header? Okay, Damien's having another go now. So doc type is correct, but now the syntax is how do we type it? What characters and that do we use to define it? Perfect, thank you. Now Damien is actually typed this for us. Hope you guys can see that. Okay, we basically have this at the very first line to describe to the actual browser that this is a HTML page, obviously, but from you guys, those who have done HTML already from the learning guides and the knowledge questions, does anyone know what this line says, apart from the fact that I am a HTML page? What does it also intrinsically say, even though it doesn't show it? Any guesses? So normally we call this a declaration. Why? Because it has an exclamation mark, and at the very start you're saying, hey, browser reader, dude, I am a doc type HTML. So no guesses for anyone what it actually declares apart from the fact that it is HTML? No? Okay. This says basically to the browser and anyone reading it, I am a HTML5. Okay, does that make sense? Even though there's no number on that, that is how we declare HTML5 documents from there onwards. To very briefly describe why that is so, without getting too technical, the reality is that HTML5 is back compatible. It will actually read and work on all browsers that never knew HTML5 existed because they were invented 5, 10 years ago. Okay, so HTML5 is what we call a back compatible, and it degrades decently. In other words, it might not look as fancy as it does on a HTML5 browser, but it will actually still show you the content, which is really important. There's nothing more annoying than you get to a web page and you can't see the content. So the content is king. Maybe the formatting won't be as exciting or as slick, but at least the content will work. Does that make sense? Everyone understood that? So that declaration up there simply says to the entire web browser world or anything that's reading it, looking at it, I am a HTML5 page. But even if you don't know what HTML5 is, I will give you code in a way that you'll understand it. If that makes any sense. That's how, if your computers could talk. Okay, the next thing is, now because we're going to be making a web page, it is crucial that we start with the brackets that basically give us, or the tag that calls us HTML. And you find that as I'm typing, I've lost it, there it is, brackets, which is really handy, will try to finish off the code for you. So, and I don't know about you guys, but I don't really fancy sitting here typing. I like clicking on things that actually can do it for me. And so if I then close that, see how immediately it actually typed the closing tag for me, little pair? Can you guys see that? So I'll do that again. So it obviously knows that I'm actually opening up a HTML tag. And then the minute that I close that tag with that last little bracket, I'm going to just enlarge that. Is that better? All right, so the minute that I actually finish typing that, I'll just quickly do it again. Sorry, I will speed up so to make sure I make this clear for everyone. It actually closes it. Excellent, thanks Talia, you can now see it. Yeah, so that basically means that brackets immediately finish the code for you. And I think everyone here will probably agree that's a very useful tool to do. Now, obviously that looks like a very tiny web page, so I'm gonna move that closing brackets down a bit, yeah? Because obviously a web page has got a bit of content if I'm going to be recreating this layout here. All right, so If a HTML page has an opening and closing brackets, can anyone name the two major components that normally are found on a web page if you know it? If you don't, that's fine. You can stay silent. I'll explain it. Steve's having a go. Yes, excellent. Every web page has a head and a body. Well done. So I'll do that now. Put a head in it. Okay, that head opens and closes. And below the head, obviously this is no rocket science element, there goes the body. Okay, so right there, even though it might not look like much and it's completely empty, if I just save that, that is actually a web page. So you can see nice and blank, but it's structurally correct. Okay, and so far we're semantic. You'll hear me say that word a lot. It's not a fetish, but something that you guys have to understand, that the code must read and appear easy to understand, not just for a human, but also for the browser. Open the brackets, see how it opens and closes. The good thing about brackets is when I click on it, I don't know if you guys can see that, it turns green. So if I've done everything well, it turns green. If I have forgotten to do, or if I've done something naughty, it turns red. See that? Evil. You're going to hell when you do that, apparently. So be aware that if you don't see any red, everything's hunky-dory. If you see any red, it's already warning you that you're heading for trouble. Sometimes if you're trying something tricky, finish what you're doing and then see if it stays red. If it doesn't, if it stays red, then whatever you've done was non-semantic, and the syntax will probably be a syntax error. Alrighty, has everyone been able to keep up with this? It's all good. Normally what I do want to do here is make sure there's no gaps between HTML closing and body, because this is pretty much one part of the web page. As you can see, the blue, which is invisible, and this is the top, believe it or not, invisible part that hides away in the web page. Okay, so can anyone give us any advice on what kind of items do we put inside the head of a web page? I just mentioned that this part is invisible, so whatever we put here will not be viewed by the browser window, but it will actually manipulate how the page gets read. Title, thank you for that, Steve, Damien, sorry. So Damien actually said is we can put in the word title, and that will actually give us the name that goes up the top. Okay, can you see that up there now? So that title is basically, even though I said it was invisible, that actually is normally what we call the area that is contained by the metadata. Just zooming out a bit so you can see that. So for those of you guys who've done it already, if you remember metadata goes in here. Now metadata, even though it might not sound that riveting, it is actually important to basically have, and this is one of the metadatas we must have inside the top of a web page. This basically defines that we are using here Roman numerals and characters. In other words, this is if this is Chinese, it would have Chinese characters. Okay, so obviously we're using an actual character set that is UTF-8. That's a standard. So even if you don't understand it, you don't really need to, be honest. You just must have that to make sure that it doesn't have any reading errors or issues, especially if it gets viewed in other elements. Okay, any questions so far? Okay, I'm getting a few no's. Okay, shall I keep going then? Cool. All right, so we're getting yes. All right, so as I said earlier, this is the head. So obviously no one sees that information up there. Other bits you can actually put in there, you'll find if you get up to that unit, that's where you actually will be able to put things that are relevant. Very quickly, what I want to do is to get into something that is actually quite important. Just give me 2 seconds. And see, so far you're saying, okay, this is really great, but you actually know, because you work every day with it, what these tags are and how to type them. Now, how do I do them when this is my very first time? Yep. There's also where you put in Google search. Excellent, thanks, Damien. Damien's actually added the metadata is where you put in the Google search author, etc. Right, that's correct. So, yep, I'm getting to that. So, the point I'm making now is that if I don't know what these words and terminologies are or how to spell them, then I've got a blank page, haven't I? So, how do we get beyond that point? Now, if you go to this link here, It's called W3C Schools. I'm putting here on the thread. What this does is this is basically where if you want to find what a code looks like or what I should type, I might zoom in this into a bit. Okay, this is where you should actually source it. Now there's several repositories on the internet. So far this is probably the most reliable, and I found it the easiest for students to get their head around. As you can see here, they give you little tutorials so you can go and try yourself how to do some of these things. And similar to what I have back here with brackets, this is an online version of it, very simplified here to give you an idea of what and how it works. As you can see here, I've done that, hit run, and it shows you. So this is a nice way for you to test code. Okay, so normally if we actually going to look, say that I want to find out what metadata is or where I can actually find meta information. So if I go to meta tag and I'm searching here on this search field inside this page. So meta tag, there we go, HTML meta tag. And boom, here we've got a few examples as I just demonstrated there. The first one is your character set. And as Damien correctly identified, this is where you can actually put some of these things that normally come up on Google. So let's say that I want this web page that I'm making to come up on Google. Someone can actually find it, and it's a description. So I'm going to just, because I hate typing, copy that. Let's paste that below that. And boom, you guys like that? Nice, fast web authoring. Description, so the content here is the intro to HTML5. So whenever you've done a search on Google and you actually have a description when you actually do the keyword find, this is what comes up. So you'll find this information is usually what you tend to see when you are doing an actual search in Google. So if we go to, let's do a quick search here, just to demonstrate the point. Okay, we're in the Google, and if we actually type in HTML5, just for some fun thing to do, I can't type there, HTML5. See this description? This is basically, that has to come from somewhere. So that description is basically this tag here, this meta tag here. So this can be a paragraph or a sentence long, and that's the information that gets shown to Google. So when you're looking for it, you can actually match and go, yep, that's what I'm looking for, or that's irrelevant, okay? Any questions on that? Yep, so Talia put, so putting in the code makes your web page come up on Google when search. Yep, I'm presuming that we've finished with a web page and it's up online. Right now, it's just sitting hidden on my computer, so no one can find this right now. Okay, so the answer is yes. By putting, believe it or not, you don't have to put these things for Google to actually find it. Google's robot, for those who know about SEOs, search optimization, you'll find that an actual software called a bot or a robot has to crawl, and that sounds a bit creepy, through your website so that it actually has read the information and it knows you exist. Until a Google bot goes through your website, you are dead to the world. No one knows that you're there unless you send that person a link to your site. So normally, again, further down towards the end of the course, I'll actually run an SEO webinar where I can show you guys how to use Google Analytics and how to use Google to basically hopefully feature your web page so other people can actually find it. Okay, so that answer is yes, but you don't always need that either. If the bot has gone through your web page and you've got a semantic, well-written web page, it doesn't hurt to have it. I would say put it in there. Okay, any other questions on that? So getting back to what I had, sorry, let's go back to, what am I looking for? Where was that before? Just trying to finish off. Okay, HTML tag. So, okay, so we've got the description. You can also put in things here, as you can see there, the author, John Doe, obviously someone's dead. Your own name in there, or the name of the company that you obviously are working for or is paying you to do that. And there's other things in here which I think I'll just very briefly mention here without getting too sidetracked, because I'm covering this later in an actual adaptive responsive layout webinar. Is this meta here, believe it or not, controls the screen. Have you ever gone to a web page on your mobile phone where it looks tiny because it's obviously trying to fit what fits in a desktop screen inside a mobile device? Okay, yep, so I've got a few, yes. So this is basically how you actually set your screen to be the width and scale of the monitor or the device you're currently holding. Okay, so for now, we don't have to put this in here. It's not the end of the world because we are viewing this currently on a web page on a desktop, so it's not the end of the world if we do that. But do get into the habit of doing that in future when you make a web page to make sure it's responsive and actually works on different devices. All right, any questions so far? Can I move on to the next stage? Yep, okay, great. Thanks, guys. All right, so just a quick little recap there. Go to W3C org schools, and obviously this is where you find, yeah, sorry, just to finish that off, this is where I find all those codes, all the tags, names. Now, there's obviously going to be lots, and in reality, you don't need to know them all. Let's just say that I want to put in an image, yeah, and I don't have any idea what it looks like, so I want to put in an image. So HTML images, look at this. CSS background images, CSS image sprite. So let's keep it simple, HTML images. So in here, which goes back to Damien's original question, is what file formats do we use? As you can see here, there's Papua New Guinea files. That's right, Steve will correct me again. GIFs again, or GIFs, as some people say it, and JPEG. So PNGs are very handy because they can actually hold a lot of information. They can hold photographic information. They can hold a lot of flat colors and that. GIFs are better for just flat colors. They don't do photographs that well. It looks like ants have been eating at it. But they are smaller files. So it's horses of courses. And like I said, I'll cover that later in Photoshop. So immediately here, I can have a look at it and go, oh, wow. This is telling me how to basically place images. So one thing that I want to get you guys into the habit of doing, which immediately I do sound a bit of a fascist, is please do not style things inside a tag. Okay, this is referred to as inline styling. Even though this website is pretty good, what they've done here to save themselves of having a web page with CSS and everything else, they've just thrown the styling in here. So it's not the end of the world, but the reality why we don't do that is imagine if we actually have, as I've done a job where we actually had about 5,000 web pages, okay, for a government website. Imagine that if I had to fix every single images on every single image on every single page, I have to go into every single page and actually change that code by hand. How long do you think that would take me? 5,000 pages. Just changing the logo, or just changing the height and width. So I would have to open up every single web page and change the code by hand. Now, believe it or not, even though that was a thing of the past, I know, aren't you guys lucky you're born in the future? This is all handled by the style sheet, which I'll cover in later on. Okay. So please, when you see style, bold, height, you can actually have height and width, but just not that sort of styling on it. So even though I just showed you how to do that, this is the bit that I need you to have. So instead of using style like that, you can use this. So you can see here, we've got width and height. You can set the width and height. You don't need the height, okay, believe it or not. Once you've got the width, the browser will sort itself out. So if I want to put an actual image in here, I've just pasted that across. Now, obviously, that is not what I've got on my folder structure. So very quickly, I'm going to pretend I've forgotten what I've got in here and go, okay, yeah, images, logo. Okay, so in here, I must make amends. So this is the source or the URL. This is the location. According to this web page, which sits right next to the folder, I have to go from here, inside the images folder, and access that file here to get to that image. So to do that, let me just read that again so make sure that I've got that visible on the screen so you know what I'm doing. Okay, so first of all, I have a lowercase folder name. So the first one is a folder, images, /, and inside that folder, the image that I want is called logo.png, Papua New Guinea. All right, so what I'll do is I will leave this be. I won't give this a height and a width. Why? I'll demonstrate in a minute. Let's pretend I forgot. I'm saving it. Now, if I want to just see what I've got so far, you'll find that. There we go. Ta-da! That is our very first web page. I know you guys are obviously very impressed. It's not going to win Design Awards. We simply have an image inside the page that wasn't there before. See? Now you see it. No, you don't. Now you see it. No, you don't. That's okay. Don't expect any applause. But that gives you an idea of how to put something in there. So let's go and let's get funky. Let's have a title. as you can see here, and I can hit return. There we've got the word title and nothing very exciting. We've actually got this here. Now you notice that I hit return there with my, as you would like say in a word processor. Nothing happens because everything is called, everything that is actually, because it is a text-based language, it's referred to as inline. Inline basically means that this is as if you're typing a letter. This happens instead of being the word S for tiles, it just happens to be an image. As you can see, everything sits here on the one line. And light here, a second, close the brackets, and continues. Does that make sense? So as far as a web page is concerned, the layout, it's as if you've got a word processor, and just like a typewriter, it'll just fill content in a full line, and then when it fills up, it goes to the following line or collapses down when it can. Okay, any questions so far? Nope, no questions. Okay, so I'll keep going then. Great, no questions, great, thanks for confirming that. All right, so what I've got there is obviously an image which has, and I'll just take this garbage text out of the way, that has no height or width. So what do you think, where do you think it got this height and width from then, if I have not defined it? I haven't actually given it a set width and height. Any guesses from you guys? How did it figure out what height it should be? Correct, Damien's put in there the original file, that is correct. So if I actually went and opened up the original photo or image, I'm going to open up the software called here preview. You can do the same thing on the Windows. Is if I go to show inspector, and this little thing comes up, and it simply tells you that the image is 300 pixels by 316. Okay. Alrighty. So that's really crucial, which goes back to, I think, Damien's original question is how big do we make these images? For now, let's just basically work on this sort of scale. It isn't as simple as that, because you'll find that when you're doing responsive web pages, responsive layouts, you'll have something, say, on an iPad 2 and onwards, you'll find it's got Retina, which is a very high definition resolution. If you actually did make an image 72 dpi, it would look very blurry. It would look like this. I don't know if you guys can see the blurriness there, but it will look pixelated. And so we do have tricks in the trade on how we actually swap images depending on what screen reads the content. Okay, but for now, I'll keep this simple. So let's go back to this, pretend we are in a simple world, is that if I actually go back to this image file, and because I've forgotten now what it was, I'm going to very quickly have a look at what it says. It's 300 by 316, okay? So if I go in here, since I like been making things semantics, and actually what I'll do here is just undo a few times here. Actually, I've lost anyway, that's fine. Let's put width. So I'm going to put width. Again, how does he know to type these words in here? You can go, as you can see, into the Google and find out W3C schools where these things are defined, okay? I'm going to put, actually, I should actually put all that in there as well. Because a lot of browsers, and I'll explain why, a lot of browsers define, actually, sorry, in there, sorry, Alt HTML5 icon. This is what it reads out. Now, I've got a couple of, believe it or not, 2 students who are also legally blind. Now, these guys, when they see a web page, so to speak, the web browser reads out to them what's there. And so if it has an image, it doesn't know what it is. It doesn't read the file name. It doesn't guess what it is. This is actually what we call, for accessibility reasons, allows you to tell the browser what this image is about. And believe it or not, in America, if you don't do that and someone with disabilities goes to a web page and everything is image, 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 which is what the browser would read, you can get sued. So make sure that your web pages are always accessible. Okay, so it's crucial that you understand that. We'll cover this again in the future. Don't worry, no one's going to sue you for now, because this is just, you are in an education environment. It's making sure that when you make web pages, they're semantic and they're accessible, so that a browser reader can at least know what that image contains. It might say a map or a logo. Okay, let me finish typing in this syntax here. We did read that it was 300 pixels. Okay, so that is basically how wide that image is when we go to the preview. Got too many windows open, sorry. Where is it? There you are. I normally probably can gather I've got like 3 other screens that are currently off view from you guys. Just for this presentation, I want to make sure you guys can see everything on the screen that I'm showing. Okay, I'll move that away. All right, so getting back to this, I've made it 300 pixels. Now, nothing's changed because as Damien mentioned correctly earlier, the image has been set by its own width, and obviously I've now just told it what it already knew. Now, all the browsers aren't that smart, especially when it comes to soft browsers like Internet Explorer. I'm sure I've made no secret that Microsoft in the past has made some of the most atrocious browsers, mainly because the irony is that these guys have been on the W3C org board, where they set the standards for HTML5, and then when they make the browsers, they didn't follow their own rules. All right, let's not go there. Anyway, so luckily now with, I think, a lot of the browsers that come with HTML10 and on the desktop, on their Surface tablets, they're much better, but you can see how many problems I had with Internet Explorer that they've actually abandoned it, because as a rendering engine, it is not efficient. This is why browsers like Chrome took off and Firefox have been able to make it into the market and are now the most favorite browsers of all. Okay, just on that point there on browsers, again, not that what's better or not, keep it simple in English. The 2 browsers that actually matter are basically Google Chrome, believe it or not. Why? Because Google Chrome, in every single Android device, this is based on WebKit, which is funny enough developed by Apple. WebKit basically is a lean, low memory hungry software, even though Chrome has become a bit convoluted lately, that allows you to basically view your web pages. And WebKit was also developed by Apple and Safari. So anything on an Apple iOS device, mobile device, which by the way, currently mobile viewing on the internet has now close to about 60%. So more than half people on the internet are viewing web pages on mobile devices, which is why we must always design things for Safari, which is basically all the Apple devices, and Google Chrome for all the Android devices. Okay. Yes, there are a couple of devices sold, like Surface tablets, and I think the 3 Microsoft phones that were sold. But again, those right now are sticking to HTML5 standards. So if you can view your pages on these 2 browsers, anything that comes now, Microsoft or not, into the future will look the same. So thank goodness for that. All right. I hope that made sense to some of you guys. If not, that's okay. We'll move on. So let's get back to the 300 pixel width design here. So if I actually go to 150, to say half its width, you can see that that's actually happened. We've actually been able to define it. Normally, I wouldn't recommend it, but at least it means that you've got that there. The reality is that if we had an image of 300 pixels and we only want to view 150, what do you think will actually, what negative impact could possibly have to this web page? Any guesses? No? All right. If not, imagine you've got basically, you're carrying you're running with, I don't know why, you're running with a full carton of eggs, okay? And you only need to use 1 egg. Now, obviously, apart from the chances of dropping that, that's a lot of things to carry. So to make an image a bigger size than it gets displayed in means that you are effectively downloading pixels and memory and kilobytes that aren't going to be viewed or seen. So it'll just slow your web page for no reason at all. There's other rules why you would do that, but for now, let's just keep it simple. Okay, so for now, this is forgiven. Normally, you would make that whatever it is. So, and sometimes 100% will actually make it whatever size is available. Obviously, this is a bad idea, but it just shows you how to, it just simply says 100% of the entire width of the screen. Okay, so that's another way to define. So we've defined that with percentages or defining it back to pixels. All right, any questions so far? All good? Hopefully I haven't put you good. I haven't put you guys to sleep yet. All good, excellent, thank you guys. All right, so that's how you actually basically put an image up on the screen. Let's bring it back to 300 since it's the right size. You notice that there's no height here. Why? Because the browsers can define it. And in most cases, believe it or not, the height variant gets ignored, by the way. Some browsers will ignore it. Modern browsers will actually do that. Some others won't. So It's one of those standards that was never quite followed or defined. Let's just make something silly here. As you can see, this browser does read it, and if you want to make me upset, submit web pages that have got squished images like that, okay? I don't know why these upset me. Okay, I'm just kidding. It just shows, with that being mean, when you do this, it pretty much screams amateur, because I'm sure you've seen it's like someone on Word who sort of can't resize an image to save their life. So please do not set heights if you don't know what the height is, because you are just going to make matters worse. And no one loves that squished image. It just screams amateur. Okay, thanks. A couple of smiles there. Yeah, so make sure that if you don't know the height, don't put it in there. And please do not, again, I can't repeat this enough, do not squish your images, because apart from being funny, if I'm trying to be funny, it looks amateurish and it looks bad when a photo, someone looks wider or taller than they are, unless you are shooting a Western. Okay, let's move on. All right, so that's obviously an image. An image can basically be placed above or below something. So I'm going to very quickly put, as you can see here, rather than just free-floating text, which was in line, I'm going to put something in here like a heading. And a heading starts with, believe it or not, you can actually have multiple headings, and the shorthand for heading is H. Now, if you can see that, this is great. Brackets is showing me, do you want a heading 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, header. So it's obviously a preemptive guessing what I'm going to type. And I'm going to be lazy, even though it's only one extra letter. I'm going to go H1 and then close brackets. And as you can see, it also closes and opens brackets. I like having things on several lines. I don't know why, it just makes it easy when I'm teaching, but I'll do that. So in here, I'm going to put something like big red heading. As you can see up there, it's coming up. You guys see that? Okay, so that's how I define a big heading. I mean, you don't have to have it there. As you can see, empty space means nothing to the reader as far as the browser reader or the renderer. So the reason why we actually have these tabs here is to make it easier for our human eye to follow the nestled tags. So it's easier to say, yeah, that's inside that, that's inside that, that's inside that. So normally I get asked, do this empty spaces mean anything? No, they don't. They don't affect the code, but it makes the code a lot easier to read than everything here was actually in one line. Yeah, it would be impossible to read everything in one big paragraph with no spaces. So that's for mainly human eye, I think. Okay, so heading 1. So heading 1's actually up there. If I want the heading, you would want the heading up there below the image, you place it below the actual object inside the tag. You can reorder these through style sheets, but to keep life simple for yourself, put things on the page in the order that you want them to come up with. Pretty simple. Cool. Okay, great. All right, so that's actually how we do that. Now let's speed up a bit. Now I'm going to put something inside the section. So in other words, I want something else to come up with. So I'm going to call this the brackets section, because I'm going to put some content inside that. In reality, I should really put this around the content, okay? Because so far I haven't really defined the header. So does that make any sense? I basically place this heading and this image inside the section tag. Can anyone see that? Now, why would I have done that apart from the fact that I might be going a bit senile? Why would you think that was actually a good move? Any guesses? Poems, declarations, any guesses? No? Okay. This is important because basically inside the body, everything's floating. Remember how everything was floating up and down? Section basically means that if I define a width here to the section, everything inside that will actually give me that width. So it's the same as if I've done this. What I might do here is go this to 100% just to demonstrate the point. Okay, see how this is currently, the width of this oversized monstrosity of a logo is defined by how wide my browser can go. And I can go wider. Actually, can I? It's not letting me. Evil. Yeah. I'm just being silly. You can see it keeps going because basically it's defined by the width of the page. Now, imagine that you don't want it to be the full width of the page. You want it to basically stay put in a certain part, and by setting the width of the section in one go, I can set the width of everything inside that. Does that make sense? It's a better way to contain information. Also, the section can be taken from here, exported from this page to another page, because you've got a nice clean open and close tags. And the body can be blank, and you can put something else in here, some other content, some other web page. Does that make sense? Steve, stopping something. So is a section similar to a container? Correct. In the old days, that's a very good question, Steve. In the old days, we used to do this, okay? In the old days, it doesn't sound like, back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, we used to do this. What am I looking for? Div, what am I doing? Equals, say, stuff. This is what we used to do. And then down the bottom, you see it's red. It says evil. I almost been evil. I am. I'm going to close the div. Now everything's hunky-dory. So everything works the same. It does exactly what that does. The difference is that a div ID, even though we can give it an ID, web browsers have no idea what that is when it comes to accessibility, okay? And so is this a section? Is it a header? Is it a footer? I don't know. I'm a browser. I don't understand that language. And so it needs to be told what it is. And these days, this is what I'm saying by semantic. Semantic, I know it sounds like an actual grammar Nazi. I suppose it is. You have to be a grammar Nazi when it gets to web stuff. So in this case here, this should be section, not div as I just demonstrated. Does that make sense for you, Steve? And here, I'm going to go and close it. Does that make sense? This is clear. Oh, thanks, Steve. Is that clear? These are containers. Remember how I described and I showed that PowerPoint, just so hopefully it makes sense. Not that one. Yep. Remember how I was referring to here earlier here? Header, navigation side. We're using section, that green one. Okay? The main content. And that's basically how a browser reads. This is semantic. So right now, I'm being semantic by basically having these sections come up correctly. Alrighty? All clear? All right, so maybe what I should do here is perhaps continue to be semantic and maybe just put to use the PowerPoint here, header, okay? Header, let's put the header up there. This page has navigation yet, so let's just keep it simple. Header. Header is different to a head, okay? Don't get these two confused. That's a head of a web page which is invisible or holds information like the title and, as Damien said, the Google description. Now, the header is usually where you put your ads and all the other banner. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put the heading in the header. Who knew? That's quite a semantic way of looking at things. Hopefully that makes sense. Get rid of some of these excessive empty spaces. So I've only got one item in the header. As you can see here, brackets. And by the way, I'm saving here. If you don't see me save, I'm using a keyboard shortcut. You should always get into the habit of having a keyboard shortcut where you can actually go to File, Save. I'm using the shortcut, keyboard shortcuts. You can do both Windows and Mac. So I'm using Control S on the Mac, and I think it's Option S on Windows, and that allows you to save as you're going along. So this immediately shows you we've now got two objects here. We've got a heading, which is actually a separate object to the actual logo. Okay. So if I wanted, Damien's got a question here. So if we wanted to do a layout similar to that example, we'd put section before every area like body and nav. No. Body is this is like, ground zero, day one. You can't, it's like when Christ was born, technically religion didn't exist before that in that format. So you cannot put anything outside body, okay? So that you'll find it won't be semantic and things will go astray. Things won't work. So anything that you want to put has to be inside the body. So the body is this. Basically everything that you see, turn it off, do my head in. Everything you see inside the web page, this, if you can call this blank open window, I'm going to just completely delete this now. Just delete. Just take it off a minute. This white space that you see on web page, that is your body. So that is like, if you can call the platform or the basis that you put everything above or inside into, okay? So to answer that question further, so similar to that example, we'd put section before every area, body. Okay, so section is there. If we actually go back to this example of this, we can, this is one thing that sounds a little bit confusing to some, is we can put a div that controls the width of everything. And that gets back to Steve's question, which is a container. So I don't want to get too technical here. I'll just leave this for now. I will, towards the end of the class, those who want to go and just want to stay behind, I'll show you a few examples of how that works. It's just that I don't want to digress too much. I want to make sure that we stay in a linear format. So please forgive me, Damien and Steve. Okay. So the question is, to answer your question, Steve, sorry, Damien, is that you place all these dudes inside body. Okay. All these guys have to be inside body, as I'm doing here. Okay. So to keep it simple, I don't have an actual footer or a page. I've simply got this. Let's go back to my original design that I started with. I'm going to put a paragraph. So let's just say under the image. Don't worry, we're getting close to the end, guys, so that hang on there. Just put a couple more things on the web page. All right, so if I then put a paragraph, as a P, as you can see, it does it for me. And because I don't want to sit here and you guys watch me type this, I'm going to copy paste from text I've got off screen here. In case you're wondering what I do to get stuff clean, is I will usually use a simple text editor or notepad that has everything stripped from it. What this does, it allows me to copy text, say from Word, and remove all the ugly, evil formatting. See how it's actually got some return elements there. So that is actually important, because when you want to put text in here, you want to put clean text. And the formatting is done in here by the tags, not by the evil word processor or software you have. So I usually get into a habit of having an actual in-between step of having a notepad or simple text that cleans the text. And I can see any special characters like this that can actually affect the content in there. Okay, so as you can see here, very quickly moving on to this through this design, we've actually got a paragraph. That was that hard. It's the P for paragraph. Close the brackets, and as you can see here, my code is a little bit hunky-dory. It doesn't matter ultimately, because as you can see, the page is demonstrating properly. But I just like, because now I've turned to a bit of a coder, I like having all this nice and clean. Otherwise, I'm thinking, why has that got space there? That shouldn't be there. It helps me sleep at night, okay? So just bear with me. If you've got OCDness, this is coding's great. It just allows you to focus, all that sort of mental issues you got. Okay, so good. So we've got paragraph there. So paragraph is there. That's one paragraph. Now, we could effectively keep putting other paragraphs, and I will, just to sort of save on time, very quickly and easily. Damien saying, I don't know if I'm jumping ahead a bit here, but with that text in paragraph, what would you do if you wanted to be bullet points? Good question. I just happen to have that. Again, I didn't pay Damien to ask me that question, but as you can see, I've actually going to preamble to the next section. What I've done here is, I'll just get rid of this so we don't confuse ourselves. All right, I'm going to just zoom out just to make life easier for all of us here. And by that I mean me. Delete. I'm just copy pasting this because it's actually easy. Actually, how about rather than do that, that's naughty. How about I type it out for you guys? All right, so the question was by Damien is, what if I want to do a bullet point list similar to what I had before? And no, I am not paying him to ask those questions. So let's start with, obviously, I want an unordered list, and that's very sexy. How do I find that out? Again, please always go to the W3C orgs and find list in here. And you go, yeah, I want that one. Unordered list. How does it work? Look, UL for unordered list. And then LI for the list item. Okay, so a bracket opens up, a bracket closes for the LI. That's your ordered list, and inside that are obviously your 3 items that you want to place. Okay, make sense? So I'm just trying to show you that rather than magically me pull code out of my head, where you guys should pull code from, okay? And then when you start typing in, if you say use something, oh yeah, that's a UL, brackets tries to help you out and finishes the coding in there. Now, list item stands for LI. As you can see here, it's there. It helps you finish tag, and that's 1. So I can say, just so you can see what I'm doing here, I'm going to put the word in 1, and because I don't like typing that much, you can copy paste the entire line and paste it again. And then obviously just change the content. 2. And if I look at the page, how we're going. Does that answer your question, Damien? That's how we do a very simple unordered list. There's a lot of kerfuffle for having those two things, but it means that we're obviously putting a little bullet point and this becomes an actual element there. All right, cool. Okay. Any other questions on that? Okay, so I'm going to whack in here the other paragraph that we had before. And I just want to tidy this up so that you guys can see what's going on here, as well as keep my code nice and tidy. This has had a hard wrap from the last place we put it from, so just make this a bit wider. What if you wanted 1, 2, and 3 font? Well, actually, again, it's a very good question. It says, what if we don't want those bullet points? What if we want numbered? Okay, so if unordered list is, wait for it, unordered list is actually not numbered, what do you think ordered list is? That was a semantic question. All right, so normally, I'll just undo that just to demonstrate so that you don't just take my word for it. Actually, edit, redo. I'm just hitting undo and redo in case you're wondering to save myself typing. So ordered list would be, OL. And let's see if I'm correct. And voila, you can see that in there. That changed from bullet, simply by changing the word from U for unordered, which is bullet points, to O to ordered list, which gives a numeric value, so that it immediately knows that the second item is 2 and 3 and 4 and onwards. You happy, Damien? Cool. All right, so I'll just redo that for one more time. I'll leave that for now, just so I'm not actually wasting time with that. So I've got, obviously, what you saw before, an ordered and unordered list. And there it is there. There's your actual page coming up there. Yep, that's right. I'm about to wind up anyway. Thanks, Talia. This is pretty much it. Actually, the timing was perfect. This pretty much shows you exactly what I wanted to cover today with this. What we tend to do now is if you've had enough of me or you've gotten and absorbed all this information, you're welcome to go. Those who wish to ask questions, please hang around and I'll be more than happy to demonstrate further. So I'm not going to be covering anything necessarily new, but rather reinforcing anything that you might want me to cover with you again. Okay, so thanks, Talia, for that. All right, any questions from anyone else before we wind up? Yes, a very good timing, thank you. I do go on a bit, so I do apologize for it. I'm welcome to receive feedback if you guys think I've waffled too much or was too long, too short. Again, I don't get offended. This is how we improve things. Let me know, because that way I can actually make it suit your needs. So, Aiden, semi-unrelated, will this be uploaded for anyone to view at any time? Yes, I'm currently recording this as an actual video, and in Edmodo, I'm going to be putting that in there. Yep, Damien's going to have lunch. Thanks. You're welcome. Thanks, Damien. Yes, so I'm going to record this. I'm going to be doing a rerun of this class again, hopefully not this Thursday coming, but Thursday week, for those who missed out, who wanted to actually be able to be here live and ask me things. With the video, you can obviously see what we just did, but when you're live, you can say, I'm going to make that into numbers or make them blue. And you can have a lot of fun with that, sort of controlling me like a remote robot. All right, guys. So awesome. And welcome. Okay, so any final questions before we wrap up the webinar? I hope you guys have learned something today. If you did already know this, hopefully reinforce what you knew, and at least covering a lot of ground as far as why we do things and why things should be where they should be. Yep, so, okay, great. Okay, guys, so if there's no further questions, I'll wind up the seminar. Again, when I post this inside Edmodo, if you did have any questions you forgot to ask, please ask that under that thread, because again, it's all part of this sort of social platform learning. So happy to continue asking questions on what we just did today in a later time. All right, if there's no further ado, I'll bid you guys farewell, and that is the end of our seminar. Okay. Thanks, guys. Bye.